In this chapter, we will learn the basics of Keyshot's powerful material graph and how to use it to create a simple and unique metal material, which we will then apply to our amulet. In this chapter, we're going to be working on creation of the base metal that you see on the amulet in this image. We're not going to be working on the layered texture yet. The layered texture will be the dirt and rust that you see on top of it that will be combined on top of our base metal shader that we will make in this tutorial. Before we get started, what I wanted to reference you guys to is a couple different YouTube sites. I highly recommend that you check out a bunch of the different videos that are in the Keyshot YouTube page. Literally just type in Keyshot YouTube page and you will find tons of amazing tutorials that they have. They keep updating this frequently, and there's some great ones in here that I will reference specifically later. There's another tutorial in here which I'm going to be referencing when I get started. One of the ways that I learned how to create rusted metal was from the author here, Esben Oxholm, and he has a great tutorial, and you can find that just by looking up Keyshot Material Study Rusty Metal. And finally, one of the videos from the Keyshot YouTube site is called Keyshot Material Graph by a guy named Will Gibbons. Literally just down here you see this where it says webinar 57, how to use Keyshot Material Graph. If you search that up, you can find it. This is one of the best Keyshot tutorials I've seen. The amount of images that come with it that illustrate how to use the program, it's incredible. And I'm going to be referencing it later, a specific image from there. Now, for those of you that purchased the tutorial, there is a folder within the downloadable material called links. If you go in here, then you open up the website links, you'll see that I've put all sorts of links, including these within here. So you can just find those links from here, as well as some others that I'll try to go over later in the YouTube tutorial. But anyways, let's get started. As you guys will remember, I just want to quickly recap. Since we're going to be using our UVW maps that we've created for these objects, we need to make sure that we have textures turned on within each of the subtools. So underneath texture map, just make sure that it's turned on, texture on. Just a reminder for those of you that skipped ahead anywhere or just seen this the first time, if you don't have this turned on, when you send it over to Keyshot, it's not going to send the UVW maps over. So under render, again, let's go to external render, Keyshot. If you have this set up, should be in here with your Keyshot to bridge thingy. And I'm just going to click BPR render, and we're going to send that over. And now you can see our model within Keyshot. Let's quickly just do some nice naming for these to make this easy. So we're going to the scenes section. We're going to expand the ZBrush button. Let's click on each of these subtools. You'll notice it highlights the selected object that's within the scene. And down here under name, let's just change this to sphere. And I think I may need to pull this over a little bit, but I can't because the image on the side. So I'm going to click here, image, and I'm going to change the width of this. Let's change it to 910. I usually mess around with these settings so you can get a nice screen size to be working with. I think this will be fine and allow us to see this fully on the side here. There we go, that's much better. So this one, instead of sphere, let's call it gem. The next one, let's call this metal. And then you'll notice under material, we have two different materials that came in from ZBrush. These don't really matter. We're going to be replacing them soon. So first thing that I want to do is let's just go to materials. Let's find something simple for the stone. Maybe we'll pick this marble black. Just click and drag that over here to it. It's not doing exactly what I want, so I'm going to try another one. This might actually be okay. I think maybe we just need to quickly adjust an HDRI map or enable an HDRI map for the background. So let's click on environments. Let's just go down through here and find something nice that has some colors in it. If you guys don't have the exact same HDRI maps, that's okay. Just find whatever you have, something that's going to give a nice reflection in the back. I think this one looks pretty good. Right now you can see the lights coming from the back, so I want to rotate that HDRI map. I think that's a little bit better. And then just so we can see things clearly, I'm going to turn off the change the background from lighting environment to color. And for the color, I don't want it to be pure white. Let's just give it kind of like a gray value so it's easier on our eyes. And then I'm also going to turn off the ground shadows because I don't think those are necessary. Make sure on color down here you say OK to commit it. And let's turn off ground shadows. So now we just have this as is. Now you can see because of the HDRI map, we're getting that nice reflection within the stone. Stone, though, it doesn't really matter. We're just putting that there for default at the moment. So let's go into our scene and let's just hide our visibility of our gem. I'm just going to click this little eyeball. Now it's hidden. Now with our metal object here, we're going to be creating a material from scratch. But, well, almost from scratch. So let's go to the materials section. Just type in diffuse. And interior diffuse is a great one to start with. So just drag and drop that onto your model. And now you can see we have that just a really basic default gray material on this. Let's go over here to materials. You can see it over here. Let's click that. We'll double click it. Let's give it a name. We'll call it metal. The other thing we're going to do too over here under material type is we're going to come down here and change it from diffuse to metal. Here we go. And then now you can see we have really, really reflective metal. And this is because it's basically reflecting like a mirror right now. And that's associated because of what you see down here, the roughness setting. So for those of you familiar with texturing, roughness is something that's used frequently within PBR-based texturing pipelines, where 0 roughness means that something reflects like a mirror. And then if you change this to, for example, 1, up here, let's just change it numerically to 1. 1 means almost no reflection. Technically, this is still reflecting. It's just so blurred out that you can't really tell. One thing that's really important to think about when you're creating metal is that everything in the world has a reflection. No matter how matte something is, it has a little bit. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea behind getting stuff to accurately work and look realistic is you always have something with some base amount of reflection. So you can see here I'm just adjusting these settings, and the reflectivity of this is changing and becoming more clear and clear as we get closer to 0. One thing that I want to show you right now, and this is something that I pulled from one of those Keyshot webinar tutorials, is I'm going to go to our images folder from the downloadable material if you bought it, and then I'm going to go to images Keyshot settings, and I'm opening this one called Keyshot values. So what I want you guys to look at is this is just a basic idea of how to understand how reflection works within Keyshot. And this image I did take from the Keyshot material graph tutorial that Will Gibbons created. Thank you, Will. That stuff is amazing. So right here, you can see we have the really shiny 0 roughness of our sphere, and then we have the 1, which this gives you a really clear example of the difference between the settings. The other thing to think about is that technically these settings are not only limited to numbers, they're also associated with colors. And this is going to be illustrated in a minute whenever I take a texture map and drop it in that has a variety of black and white values. So just always kind of think of pure black or 0 equals mirror reflection, pure white or 1 equals totally blurred out reflection. Still reflecting, but it's just very minimal. So what we need to do now is with our metal material, we're going to click this. Let's click on material graph here to expand the material graph. And just as a quick reminder, if you guys are not able to select the material graph, that means that you are running an incompatible version of Keyshot. Not incompatible, but you just do not have the ability to use it. So there's the Keyshot HD and Keyshot Pro. Keyshot HD will not have the material graph editability, as you can see down here, but Keyshot Pro does have it. That's the difference in price point comparison. So apologies if you guys have HD and you're trying to get this to work. You may not be able to follow along from this point on. So I have the material graph opened up. And again, what I want to do is I'm going to illustrate to you guys how not only is roughness working to create the reflectivity values, but a texture map. So over here under the texture panel, let's go down, and there by default there is one called metal. This should be alphabetical. So metal texture. If you guys have Keyshot, this should come in by default. It should be included. Let's just drag and drop that into the scene. Or not the scene, but the actual material graph. It's important to have it there. And so all these nodes are pretty awesome to have in Keyshot. And what I want to show you really quickly is if you want to be able to preview any of these different nodes that you have in your material graph, all you have to do with it selected is press C on your keyboard. So now you can see that this is red. This means it's the active node in the scene, and you can see that it has been applied to our model. Now, if I was to click this node and then press C, now you can see that it switched back to the metal shader that we've created. So I want to come back to texture map, pressing C. The other thing I want to show to you guys is by default, mapping type is set to box anytime that you apply a material. So we're going to switch this to UV. And if you're getting just like a blank gray value, that means you sent your model over without any UVs. So you need to be able to see something like this. And these are the UVs that we used whenever we created all of our different mix maps, etc. So right now, we're going to end up taking the different stripes that you see here between, basically this is kind of like a scratchy metal texture. And the white values are going to be really blurred out, and the more gray values are going to be more reflective. So let's just zoom in here to more clearly illustrate this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to left click this node and then drag it over here and release it on the color section. And now I'm going to click on the metal piece and I'm going to activate this by pressing C. And now that is the active material in the scene. And you can actually see it here a little bit. Notice how the white section here, if you were to look really closely, this is actually blurry, and the black section is doing much clearer reflection. A way to really illustrate this is for us in here to right-click in the scene, come down here to Utilities, and let's pick, I believe it's Color to Number, and we're going to left-click this node and put it into the input, left-clicked here, into the color. Now let's press C on the Color to Number. And now over here, you can see we have these different settings for color to number properties, input from, input to, output from, output to. What we're going to be doing is adjusting these, and you'll notice that the color values on here change. So for example, I'm going to drag this up a bit, and our darks are getting darker. I'm just going to really crank this up. And now I'm going to click on the metal again. I'm going to press C, and now check it out. So those black values again, super, super transparent. Oh, by the way, we should be dragging this into roughness value. I've been putting it into color. Let's unlink this, right click, disable, or actually right click and remove. And what I wanted to do here is drag into the bottom. See where there's this plus section? If you drag basically anywhere on here that's not one of these nodes, it gives you some different selections to pick from. So click on roughness. There we go. That's what was problematic. Now you can really, really see what's going on. So the black value that's coming from the map that's driven is pure reflection, and then the white, again, is the blurred out section. Sorry about that a second ago because I had it in the color section there. I'm going to real quick again show this color number. Let's press C. You can see how strong our settings are here. I am going to use this, but I do want to change the tiling a bit, and I want to change the input and output settings because I think this is just too extreme. So I'm going to change this down a little bit more. I really don't want any pure reflections. I'm going to look at this again. I still think this is maybe a little bit too strong. Let's play around with some of these others and see what they do. Okay, cool. I think the output from one might be a good one to use. I think maybe I want to get it just a bit more reflective, so let's bring that down a notch. I think this might work because I really don't want any pure reflections on this. Remember, this thing might be pretty old, but I do want to have at least some type of reflectivity. So I think this is pretty good for a base color reflection. One thing that I do feel like is maybe these lines that we're using are a bit too big and throw the scale off for this. So let's come over here to texture map. Let's press C on it. So it's now active within the scene. What I want to show you over here is see the size and mapping underneath width and height, this adjusts the tiling in your scene. Right now, I think they're linked, which is good. If you want to increase the tiling on your object, then just type in 0.5, tab 0.5, and you can see that now we have a higher resolution. I'm going to unlink these, and I'm going to change this to 0.5. I want these two identical to one another. That means that there's no non-uniform scaling or stretching going on with the map as it's being applied. I think this is probably going to help our metal feel a little bit more realistic. So again, I'm activating the metal node and taking a look. Yeah, I think that's more in the ballpark. One other thing I think I'll do is I'll add just like a slight bump to this. That'll go along with the lines of what we're seeing here. So I'm just going to right click this, duplicate, and I'm going to drag this into our bump setting. Now you can see it's super, super, super strong. So let's double click this metal texture one. Looks like it's activated. Down here under bump, you can see bump height. Let's turn this down to like 0.5. Let's see how that looks. That's looking better. 0.1 maybe. I want this very, very subtle. I honestly think that's going to be pretty good. This way it gives us like just a little bit more breakup that gives it that subtle, realistic feel to this that we want to see, that kind of makes things feel less CG. Now, one thing to keep in mind is whenever you're plugging something into the bump map section, if you highlight this and you press C, oh, it actually did work. Sometimes when you're plugging a thing into the bump section, it turns into a RGB map, in which case, usually at that point, I think you need to press B on your keyboard to see it. If we get to that later, I will show you how to do it. But to me, this looks pretty good. One final thing I'll show to you, although we're not going to be using it, is how to put your own color into the scene. So dragging this down, remember I did that originally by accident. Sometimes maybe you do want to have a different color within your metal. Let's click on the root of this. If you want, you can do it one way by just clicking up here. By default, you see it's got this gray value. You could come over here and start adding red, etc., or pick different kind of color values that are within here. But what I want to mention to you guys is most metals in real life really do not have a lot of coloration within them. A lot of companies will introduce that within manufacturing so that when you buy a car or different things, you can get kind of colored metals. But for the most part, that's not happening with metals that you find just naturally. So that's why I usually tend to keep it at that original gray value. So I'm just going to cancel this, and it goes back to that default gray value. If you did want to, though, for example, you remember earlier, I'll just duplicate this again, this node, and toss it up here. Remember, we dragged that in there earlier, and it actually is driving the color a bit based on this. But I didn't like that, so I'm just going to delete that. So anyways, I think we have a pretty good material setup here. What I think I'm going to do right now is, let's call this metal texture. I'm just going to name these so it's a little bit cleaner. Metal bump and metal reflection, or we'll call this one metal roughness. And then metal, we'll just keep it this way. Let's go ahead and close this window. Or actually, before we close it, let's click on the Save to Library button. Because I think in case this crashes, or if you want to come back and use it later, it's nice to have this base that we can work from as we start making layered materials in our next chapter. So if you click on this, it'll allow you to select between any of the folders that are currently existing within Keyshot. For example, I have one called Amulet, etc. But let's say you want to make your own. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to click on this Amulet one. You can see some different materials that are in here previously. This is because when I was testing this out and creating things, they were available. But if you need to, you can create your own folder in here. So I'm going to say Materials, Add folder to Materials. Let's call this one Amulet Demo. I'll say OK. And now you can see that we have this folder available. And that'll be in here for your Keyshot anytime you load it up until you decide to, for example, right click and delete it or get rid of it. I think you just select it and delete it. But anyways, let's go back here again, material graph, click the little save button. I believe it's down here at the bottom. Whenever you create it for the first time, it'll show up in the bottom. The next time that you load Keyshot, it'll go into alphabetical order. Let's click that. We'll say OK. Metal already exists. You want to overwrite? Let's say no. Let's call this, that's because I have a metal in the scene somewhere else. Material type, node name. Let's call this, here we go. Metal Amulet Demo. Let's try that. There we go. Now that name exists. And you can see we have it in here. It created one originally. Let's just take that and we will delete that. We right click and delete it. Yes, let's get rid of it. And now we just have the metal material that we've created that we see here. I'm going to close this. One other thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to use a different HRI map. I think this one maybe is just a little bit too bright. I'm going to go down through here. I think this might be pretty nice. Let's take a look. This could work. We'll play with this a bit. That being said too, I think it's a good time for us to actually save our file. So let's go File, Save As, find a location that you can save this to. We will call this Amulet Keyshot Demo A. And I think that's enough for this tutorial so that you know how to do the basics, how to, get in there, make a material, know how some of the setup works within the scene. And next, what we're going to be focusing on is how to create the layered material in here where we have different dirt and whatnot working in our scene in order to give us this really realistic look. This tutorial and its downloadable content is available now on my QBrush, Gumroad, and Steam stores, which are linked in the description below. Watch the following video to see what is included with your purchase. If you purchase this tutorial, here is a preview of all the bonus content you will receive. Firstly, in ZBrush, I've included 3 different versions of the amulet. 1, my final sculpted version with all the ornamentational details and destruction. 2, just the sculptural details like ornamentation. 3, a version without anything so you could follow along and create your own during the process. Secondly, you will receive the final Keyshot file demonstrated here, which contains all of the texture maps, lighting, and everything that is shown during the tutorial. The thing that I find really useful about this is having access to the material graph and seeing the complex custom materials that are created during the tutorial. This will really help you with understanding how to create your own complex materials in Keyshot. Next, you will receive all of the final Psd files showcased throughout the tutorial, including this gold-painted Mount Fuji design with all of my different layering processes, as well as the custom crest base that is used later for sculpting in ZBrush based off of masks. Also, you'll get all of the final texture maps that are showcased during the tutorial, such as these, which are all tileable. You will also receive all of the original videos in downloaded format at their full high definition resolution. Also, I have included dozens of high quality personal art images such as my Dark Souls 3 High Lord of Walnor fan art, which inspired me to create the Amulet tutorial to showcase the techniques I learned and developed during the process. Whether you purchase this tutorial or follow along for free on Facebook or YouTube, thank you for your continued support, and I cannot wait to see the epic amulets you create soon.